Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor podcast. Devon Taylor, Devon Taylor. Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of the Devon Taylor podcast, where we have guests from all around the world tell their unique and powerful stories to not only allow their voice to be heard, but for you to leave feeling inspired. Today's guest is someone who has turned unimaginable personal loss into a mission of hope and healing for countless families. After the passing of his son Ryan, he and his wife created Ryan House in Phoenix, a place that provides respite, palliative, and hospice care for children and their families. Out of that experience, he has become a national leader in reimagining how we care for our kids with complex needs. His vision? To create a network of children's respite homes across America, a bold plan of 50 homes in 50 cities over the next 5 years. So I'm happy to say, please welcome to the show, Jonathan Cotter. Hello.
Hi, Devon. Nice to see you. It's great opportunity. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
Yeah, no, thank you for being here. I'm super excited for you to tell your story. And, what really caught my eye was just, the remarkable mission that you guys are on. A lot of people, I faced loss in my life. My brother passed away when I was a teen, and it changed, the family dynamic a lot. But I kind of want to just start with, can you share what those early days were like when you first envisioned Ryan House?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often say that the creation of Ryan House here in Phoenix, Arizona was very much a stars aligned kind of moment. It was the right family with the right kind of experiences, with the right kind of community at the right moment in time. And it just magic happened here. To kind of start a little bit before that, which was really the birth of Ryan, and a little bit about, kind of why Arizona and why this thing even came to be is we're an Arizona family. My wife and I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona. I was born in the Minneapolis, Twin Cities area, but my family got tired of the cold and the snow and moved to Arizona. So all I know was really growing up in Arizona. My wife is a true native, born and raised Tucson, Arizona. When we got married now 33 years ago, my career path was consumer packaged goods marketing. I worked on brands that you know and love. My very first job was on Dial Soap. I was a junior brand marketing person on Dial Soap and did that for a few years. Then my wife and I got married. We went off to see the world. We left Arizona. We moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin. It was literally a 100-degree shift the day that we moved to Green Bay, Wisconsin.
Wow, that's a big change.
Yeah, it was 70 in Phoenix that January day and minus 30 when we landed in Green Bay. So our dog was freaking out. But the job that we went for was I was a brand manager on Breyer's Ice Cream. We did that for a couple of years. Then we moved to Minneapolis and I worked for the Pillsbury Company, the Doughboy. And it was in Minneapolis that we had our first son, Ethan, who's now 27 years old. Wasn't life perfect. And then I had an opportunity with Pillsbury to move to London, England, and do a 3-year job assignment in London, England. And so we decided to do that. And the idea was to move to England for a few years, come back to Minneapolis, raise our family. Life is going to be perfect. I don't think we're ever moving back to Arizona, but that's not how it played out. So in England, at this point now, I'm like a senior marketing manager. And we decided to continue our family. And that's when Ryan was born. Well, Ryan was a perfect birth, 10 fingers, 10 toes, everything worked, beautiful baby. And we knew how to be parents already because we had a very active 2.5-year-old toddler at this point. Well, about 8 months into Ryan's life, we started to really recognize that things just weren't working well for him. He just wasn't developing compared to our very active toddler, Ethan, who was practically running at 10 months old. At 8 months old, Ryan was really struggling to sit up by himself, to lift his head up. And it was actually my parents who had come to England for a visit at the holidays. And my mom, when she got off the plane, she held Ryan and she immediately teared up, looked at my wife and said, "I'm so sorry." And it was, what are you talking about? And that was really, I think, a confirmation or a moment, tipping point moment for us when we said, okay, this is really confirming that something just isn't right, because we had been spending time with him every single day. And so hadn't really seen the increment, the big change. But my mom, being a mom of 4 kids, just knew that a baby should be stronger than this. And just immediately knew something wasn't right. That put us on a path to specialists. Ultimately, we got the diagnosis of a rare genetic disease called spinal muscular atrophy, which is, I'm a carrier, my wife is a carrier, as everybody's a carrier of something. And it just, in our situation, the odds played themselves out, unfortunately. And Ryan was diagnosed with SMA, or spinal muscular atrophy. Well, this was 24 years ago at this point. And when that happened, there were no treatments and no cures for that disease. And the life expectancy was not good. Basically, the doctors told us, don't expect him to live to his second birthday. And so our world was shattered. And we were 11 hours away from the closest family member, all back in Arizona. And so what happened was we just had to kind of buckle down and start to kind of live life. Ryan's care became very intensive very quickly. We were going into the hospitals a lot with pneumonias. He started needing a lot of physical therapy appointments. And it was the physical therapist that was now somebody we were seeing weekly who kind of suggested that we go visit a place called Helen House. And Helen House is the world's first children's hospice home. It was in Oxford, England, 45 minutes up the road from where we were living in London. But it was described to my wife and I, Holly and I, as a children's hospice home. And so we immediately rejected that idea. We just immediately associated hospice with death and dying and giving up. And when you have a child like Ryan, it's like, no, we need to have hope. We need to find a cure. We need to save this kid. And so we we basically rejected the idea, but the physical therapist was relentless. And after months of just saying, hey, you don't understand, this place is really a place for supporting your family along these very difficult journeys. They're going to help provide what's called overnight respite, which is really an opportunity for them to care for our son, Ryan, who needed a lot of care. But we could trust the team to care for him so that my wife and I could actually get a good night's sleep, because Ryan's care was now becoming round the clock. Ryan, to give you a perspective, Ryan didn't have the ability. I describe him as wicked smart, mature beyond his years, but very physically challenged. So he couldn't get his hand up to his mouth to feed himself. He couldn't walk by himself. He couldn't get to the toilet by himself. He couldn't shower by himself. He also, when he slept, couldn't turn himself. So when his body needed to change positions, as we all do throughout the night, and we all just kind of shift a little bit, he couldn't do that. So he would cry out, and every hour or 45 minutes, we would have to go into his room and flip him on his side. And then 45 minutes later, he'd cry out, and we'd go into his room and flip him on his other side. So my wife and I were like zombies the whole time. And so we finally reluctantly decided to go to this place. And when we walked into the doors of Helen House, it was literally not what we expected. It was truly a home away from home. It was just a gorgeous, very large home, 8 children bedrooms, 3 family suites. It was really geared for a culture and a team of people to handle families like ours who had children with life-limiting conditions. And by that, I mean, these kids were all very medically fragile, lots of significant medical conditions. Not all of them had a neuromuscular disease like us, like Ryan had an SMA. Some of them would have been a pediatric cancer or a leukodystrophy or severe cystic fibrosis or some other terms that maybe your audience is somewhat familiar with. But there's thousands of rare diseases that I couldn't begin to pronounce.
Right.
And so but the common element is that this journey is tough. It's very exhausting. It's very emotionally draining, especially when you have a child that may not live into adulthood and may not live a long life. You have an extra layer of emotional, what's called psychosocial and emotional pressures, because you're trying to find joy every day. At the same time, you're realizing that you might need to be planning for your child's death and bereavement and what's called anticipatory grief. So anyway, this place just really became incredible to us. And we had the opportunity to stay at Helen House a number of times over the next year and a half before we eventually moved back to Arizona. We were told not to expect Ryan's second birthday. And so we were getting close to that date. And we were like, okay, we need to figure out life here. And so we decided that going back to Minneapolis for Pillsbury just wasn't an option. The General Mills organization had bought Pillsbury as a company merger back in those days. So I kind of jokingly say that the Doughboy sent us to London, England, but Betty Crocker brought us back. And so we decided to come back to Arizona, surround Ryan with love and family, and just see if we could. And we did that right before he celebrated his second birthday. So we did celebrate Ryan's second birthday back in Phoenix. And then from a Ryan life perspective, he then celebrated his third birthday and a fourth birthday and a fifth birthday, and the kid kept going. He was an awesome kid. We'll talk more about this during the time we have today, because he's clearly my North Star. The kid was awesome, but very physically challenged. If he was here today talking with you, he would describe himself as moldy cheese, way past his expiration date. So Ryan lived till the age of 17 and a half years old. He died just about 7 years ago at this point, and definitely became an influence and a major point to how I really want to change the world and a lot of the work that I'm doing. And then your question was ultimately about Ryan House. And so I've been kind of building up to
I
that.
love it. No, thank you for going back into that, because just giving the perspective of what you guys went through just brought up so many emotions. And I even want you to, I kind of want to go back too, because when you say hospice and even your idea of what you thought of it, most people don't really know the
Right.
extent of what it is. Can you kind of just explain to us what is hospice, and
Yeah.
like, why was it such I mean, obviously you said why, but how was it such an impact for Ryan?
So hospice is traditionally, especially in the United States, but generally globally everywhere, it's kind of very specialized care for people that are in their end of life. And typically for adults, because we all are going to be born, we're all going to live, and eventually we're all going to die. You hope that those are long lives. That's what everybody generally, that's the expectation, and everybody wants that. And then as a person that's getting a little older myself, and I'm kind of that sandwich generation. So my wife and I are experiencing parents that are now dying, or grandparents that are dying. Some of them very bright, some of them with dementias and Alzheimer's and different diseases. And that's the normal projected trajectory of life. And hospice is usually in that last end of life phase where it's really about comfort care. So it's really about pain management, making sure that the person is very comfortable, and you're not really trying to extend life anymore. You're just a recognition that the body is ready to be done and basically die. And so it's really about just trying to make that last journey as peaceful and comfortable as possible. The problem is, for children, it's really hard to predict when that last 6 months of life is going to be. And so kids are very resilient. They're growing at the same time that they often have these challenging diagnoses and diseases. Kids, medical science is fantastic these days and is really finding treatments, maybe not cures for diseases, but treatments, which is great. I often think that the number one thing that parents who have a child with a medical fragile condition want more than anything in the world is a cure for their child. They'll give anything to cure their child. And sometimes those cures can happen, and sometimes there are treatments that can happen, but sometimes not all kids are going to be cured. The second thing that I believe that parents really wish for is sleep. It's just giving them a break along these journeys. There is a concept called palliative care, and that's really at a higher level than hospice. So palliative care is really just a lot of respect and support for a caregiver, a family. It's a holistic support for the whole family. And this can be done for families whose elder grandparent or parent is dying, or somebody in their adult phase, but also for children. It's just to kind of recognize that there are more medically challenging conditions, and that this need a more of an interdisciplinary team of support, where you bring in social workers and chaplain services and child life specialists and people that really understand that the journey itself, it's not just the medical care, it's the journey that really becomes very difficult. So this idea of palliative care is kind of like an overarching umbrella, and then hospice care is within that, really for the last end of life particular journey, where then it really becomes about pain management to a very specialized level, where you're doing a lot of morphine and things, and just really preparing for those final phases. And so that's so when the term hospice care was presented to my wife and I, we rejected it, because we were just getting into all of this stuff. We weren't knowledgeable about any of this stuff. We hadn't been exposed to any of these things. In fact, when we moved to England, the only person in my family life that I had ever been around that had died was my grandpa.
Mm,
And that I wasn't even around when he died. We were living in Minnesota and he died in Arizona. So I hadn't really been around death and dying.
yeah,
And so when all of a sudden that word was presented to my wife and I, were like, oh, we don't want that. We
yeah,
learned to embrace it. I really think that my wife and I had literally the best of both worlds. We learned the British are decades ahead of Americans in terms of this kind of support for families in these situations. Hospice care really started in England. There are programs in the United States that are great, but we don't do it nearly as well and nearly as broadly as the British do. So the fact that we got trained in England to kind of understand what those concepts were, and then came back to America with Ryan, I think Americans, we tend to be more aggressive in terms of medical care, and we're going to save this child and we're going to save this thing. So I think Ryan lived for 17 and a half years because he was in America, because I think our care was more aggressive, really trying to push a lot of things here with him. But I think mentally, my wife and I got trained over there, understanding that he may not live next week. He may not live, and it's okay. And let's just kind of enjoy the quality of life that we have with Ryan. And we got to do that for 17 and a half years.
How did you guys get to that point? Because I think, a lot of people struggle when someone dies with, or at least, when someone is sick, we struggle with the idea of getting to a point where we're okay with it, or, we're accepting of it. How did
Yeah.
you guys get to that point?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, and that really is a personal choice, right? In terms of, I could tell you just as an example, my dad died about a little 2.5 years ago now at this point. 90 years old. He was a child psychiatrist. I think the man was probably in his heyday. I mean, he was a Renaissance man. He knew everything about everything, just wicked smart. But he had some early Alzheimer's in those last couple of years of his life. And then he had a fall, broke his femur, and ended up going into rehab. And he really cognitively, his brain just really took a quantum leap down. And it was interesting to me because that kind of experience can happen to many families. Many elder people can fall and break, and then that becomes a really challenging situation. But to me, what was interesting was I've got three sisters and my wife, and it was interesting how we all I was kind of observing my sisters and I, and how we all kind of were watching and managing and going through our own process for my dad's end of life.
Yeah.
And I've got one sister who really is that kind of attitude that no, 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 save anybody at all costs, always, and just grab that last breath, that last breath, that last breath. I personally, and this is just a choice, I have really, because of I think my son's journey and what we've been doing with our caregivers, my wife and I really more have an attitude of it's about quality of life for us, not quantity of life. And so when life just really, you're just not, when you get to a point where you're just really breathing barely, that to me is not quality of life. And so for me, I would just rather be done with it if you can. But for me, it was helping my dad just kind of coach my sisters and stuff, saying, hey, it's okay, let's help you be as comfortable as possible. Let's make sure we reiterate that we love you, we care about you. You've been a great provider for our family, and just really try and enjoy the time that we have in these last few moments. Whereas my sister was like, come on, dad, let's do more rehab. We can get you up and out of this chair. We can get you moving. And it just was a different dynamic. And that's just, people are going to be different, but that's just my philosophy. And I
Yeah.
definitely credit that to our 17 and a half year journey with Ryan.
Yeah, no, that must have really helped with just with the transition for your dad. But I love that it's more of the quality of life, because we do get to a certain point where if we're, living under certain circumstances, it just really isn't, productive. For them, for us, for anyone that's involved. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I
it's
was going
yeah,
to,
it's go ahead. Yeah.
well, yeah, no, I was gonna also just kind of I didn't want to forget about answering your first question, which was really about
Yeah.
Ryan House. It was, and just kind of kind of linking this conversation to back to kind of some of the I think major themes that you like to really talk about, which I love because it's about change the world, and how did I kind of draw from my family experiences and really. I'm very driven and very passionate now to make a mark on the children's healthcare system in the US. And it really is because of these life experiences. And so when our family came back to Arizona and we did celebrate Ryan's second birthday, the last stay that we had at Helen House in England was that had become such an important part of our caregiving support system while we were there. to give you kind of a virtual tour quickly, when you go and stay at a Helen House, it is really for, as I described it, 8 children bedrooms, 3 family suites, specialty rooms, so art room, music room, accessible playground. This place is built for kids from the ground up and to support families. It's an awesome home away from home kind of feeling. It's not a hospital, it's not a nursing facility. It just is a beautiful home physically, and then it has the care team. When you stay there, it is it is for overnight respite. So the minimum stay at a place like a Helen House was 48 hours. It isn't for babysitting services. It isn't to drop your kid off for a couple of hours so you can get a date night or go run some errands. It is for a true break. And so so the minimum stay at a place like that is 48 hours up to a week at a time, where you ultimately, the first time you come stay there, you all stay as a family. The next time you come stay there, you start to really trust the team that you can now entrust your child to their care. So that now what happens is that you now have Ryan stay at Helen House by himself, and that Holly and I and our older son could go home and sleep in our own bed, or we could spend time with our growing toddler, or we could then go on a mini vacation and protect our marriage and our couple,
Yeah.
being a couple. So the minimum stay is 48 hours up to a week at a time, up to 28 days a year at no cost. Families were not charged anything for anything. And it was just a beautiful experience. And so we had used that a lot in that last year and a half that we had been in England, from Ryan's diagnosis to when we finally left England. And in our last stay, we asked the team at Helen House, okay, we're now moving back to Phoenix, Arizona. How do we continue this kind of support in Arizona? And they looked at us and they said, yeah, no. While there were 54 of these kinds of community-based children's respite hospice homes across the United Kingdom, there were none of these in the United States 20 years
Wow.
ago. And so they said, yeah, there's just not only none in Arizona, but none anywhere in the United States. And we said, well, that stinks. Nothing we can really do about that. Our goal was to get back here to Arizona. We did celebrate Ryan's second birthday. I got a job. We got him now connected with local medical specialists and physical therapists, and we kind of started to resume life. And about a year after being back, my wife started passionately talking about our experiences at Helen House, and a community started to kind of rally around her. And this is that moment of change the world, where we didn't really have a clear vision that we were going to do this. It just organically kind of happened because my wife started passionately talking about it. A community started rallying around her. People kind of said, I can't believe this doesn't exist already. This should really exist. After one kind of community meeting that we ended up being a part of, my wife and I drove home and said, I think everybody's telling us we need to do this. I guess we're going to do this. And so
Wow.
that was really the moment that we decided to incorporate what became Ryan House, named for our son. We did this in 2004. It took our community 6 years of raising money to ultimately raise the millions of dollars that it took to physically put a shovel in the ground and build the building that is now in Phoenix, that opened in 2010. So it's been open now for 15 years. And as
Wow.
this concept really took shape, I became the first board chair. I'm the one that filled out all the 501c3 paperwork to incorporate Ryan House. And as the thing took shape, it quickly became, okay, Holly and I didn't come to Arizona with a purpose that we were going to do this. But as this thing really took shape, it became clear, okay, now our goal is to bring Helen House to Phoenix. Nothing
Mm.
more, but nothing less. And we were very fortunate to have some just amazing community leaders get around us. And so the right people with the right time, the stars aligned, and it just magic happened here. And what has
Beautiful.
happened in the 15 years that Ryan House has now been open is that Ryan House, the community has been very supportive of Ryan House here, to the tune of the team at Ryan House raises $3.5 million a year, every single year, so that families don't have to pay anything for the services that they receive. That's a lot of money, and that's a lot of
Amazing.
community support. And that's really hard to do. And so when we were building Ryan House, I kept looking out into the rest of the United States going, come on, we can't be the only ones doing this. Somebody else has to be doing this also. And I discovered a program in Northern California called George Mark Children's House, which ultimately was also inspired by the UK through some connections that they had. They ended up building the first house. Ryan House is the second house to open in the United States. The first house, George Mark Children's House in a suburb of Oakland, California, is the first house that opened, very much modeled after the UK. It started with a very generous donation from their founder that allowed them to get the house open. And they opened their doors a few months after we incorporated. So when we incorporated, none of these existed, but a few months later, the first house opened. Well, over the years, other communities tried to open these houses and work on this stuff, but raising money from a philanthropy perspective is really hard to do. And so they really struggled. And so we would band together every once in a while and do phone calls with each other and kind of inspire each other in Ohio or Florida or Seattle or other Minneapolis as it was trying to develop a program. And people would say, it's really hard. We should have a national leadership kind of a group to kind of pull all of us together. But nobody was willing to do that. And I wasn't willing to do that either during those years because I was still board chair of Ryan House or very active on the board at Ryan House. I was at this point, a director of marketing, trying to make money and support my own family. And then Ryan was still alive. And so he had a lot of care needs. And we had our older son, Ethan, who's now 27 years old. And so we had an active family. And it's like, I don't have time to be a national champion. But then Ryan died. And when Ryan died, that changed everything for me. That was a big tipping point for me in terms of, okay, at that point in December of 2018, just when he died, at 17 and a half years old, that hit me hard. And at that point, I really said, you know what? I'm so frustrated at the US healthcare system. Why don't we have more of these kinds of programs? Why don't we support families along these journeys better? And it really comes down to the system is not designed to do this. The healthcare system in the US is really designed for adult care. So when you're trying
What
to
do you think that is?
well, because by far the majority, I mean, everybody's going to be born, everybody's going to live, and everybody's going to die. And
Yeah.
so the you know the reality is that a child like Ryan, my son, is less than 1% of all children are going to have a very significant medical condition, which is great. 99% of kids are not the journey that my family has been experiencing, which is great. We want kids to live long lives, to go play baseballs, to do all the things that they are normally supposed to do. So in a way, it's kind of a needle in a haystack population. The issue, though, is that they're very expensive kids.
Right.
So my kid drove a $65,000 wheelchair when he ultimately, in his early teenage years, had spinal rod surgery. They inserted basically a metal rod in his back to keep him sitting upright so he could breathe better. That was a $250,000 surgery. Eventually, when he was 15 years old, the first treatment for his disease finally was approved by the FDA. That was a spinal injection. It was a little too late for my son, didn't save my son, but my son was able to get some of those injections. Every one of those injections, and he needed an injection every 4 months. Every one of those injections was $175,000. So that's just an example. I mean, these kids are very expensive. So they account for over a third of all dollars spent on children. But there's not very many of them. And so policymakers and legislators and all the help and support in the country is really focused on adult care because it's by far the majority of people. And I get it because I'm getting old. I'm falling apart now too. So I'm going to need those kind of services as I get age. So I'm not against any of that stuff by any means. But I think what we need to do is bring more attention to the children issues. And there just wasn't a national organization that really was bringing attention to medically fragile children and their families, the support and the need that they have, and trying to build community programs like a Ryan House. It doesn't have to be exactly Ryan House, but programs like a Ryan House.
And so, yeah, and I love that your vision now is to try to bring that across the US. What do you think has been your biggest barrier? Obviously, money is one of them, but you guys have been able to organize to create Ryan House and
Yeah.
collaborate with the other house. How do you think you can keep that going?
Yeah. I mean, my ultimate wish, as you said in the opener, our short-term goal, it would be to have 50 homes open in the top 50 markets in the next 5 years. Wouldn't that be awesome? Today, there's less than 7 open. And
Wow.
so there's a long way to go. Most major metro areas should have one of these houses, if not more than one, because with only 8 children bedrooms at Ryan House, and Phoenix is a major metro area, there are more kids and families in Phoenix and in Arizona than Ryan House can serve. So there is a wait list and stuff. So we need more of these kinds of homes. And the reality is yes, money matters. It does take money to build these homes and to support and sustain these homes. But what we really need to do is change policies and regulations. And that's where I think we're having a lot of positive impact So when my son died and I made the decision to be all in on this topic, I decided to shut down my marketing world, go back to school, relaunch myself as a public health expert. And so I decided to go back to school and get a master's in public health. I ended up choosing to go to Johns Hopkins for that program, which was a phenomenal degree and also just a great alumni network to be able to open up doors for me and start to engage in conversations, because I'm sitting here right now talking to you in Scottsdale, Arizona. One of the things, like you, I don't blur out my background, because what you see on my background is Doctor Who posters and Marvel posters,
I
and
love it.
I'm clearly in my son Ryan's bedroom. I
Mhm.
love being in this space. This is where my son lived. This is not where my son died. The computer that you and I are kind of talking to in my obnoxious green microphone, this is all Ryan's equipment. Ryan was a nerd, big time nerd, loved it. This was a gaming computer that he and I built together. I mean, so I just love being in his space and finding his energy, and really drives me to what I do right now. And
Mm.
so I decided to go back to school, become a public health expert. I was a marketing person, but I wanted to make sure that if we were going to change the world, we needed to do it, I believed, at the federal level. We needed to get this organized at a national level and really impact system changes. We needed to have better licensing, healthcare licenses, so that homes like this could open up in a clean healthcare license that could be linked to reimbursement payment processes, which all of these children should qualify for the Medicaid system, which is under a lot of pressure generally right now. And so there's lots of reasons why the Medicaid system, I believe, needs to be supported and saved in many ways. But it also it's the key funding mechanism to fund support for children and families that are going through these journeys, as well as insurance companies. But
Right.
the insurance companies in the Medicaid system need a license to be able to link to provide funding to. And there
Yeah.
just is not a healthcare license designed to support a holistic kind of care model like a Ryan House. And so I was starting to, when I graduated with my MPH, my master's in public health, I said, all right, now how do I go change the world? And so I wasn't intending to start another organization. I was really going to join another nonprofit, or maybe I was going to go work for the Centers of Medicare and Medicaid and try and do this from the inside of government. And I was fortunate enough to talk to some senior leaders at Centers of Medicare and Medicaid. And they said, Jonathan, we love you. You have a lot of energy and a lot of passion, and you're going to get very frustrated working in the government system, because we
Yeah.
go very slowly. We have offices in the bottom basement of a building that have no windows. You're going to be driven nuts. You clearly want to move things forward more quickly than I think our system will
Beautiful.
do. And I respected that. I said, all right, well, and ultimately the conclusion came to, people started to surround me, and they said, I think we need to start another national organization that really can be that center point champion for these community-based care models. And
Yeah.
so, kind of like at the beginning of Ryan House, we said, all right, let's do it. And so 3 years ago now, I created an organization called the National Center for Pediatric Palliative Care Homes, which is a mouthful. So we just kind of refer to it as the National Center. And then we developed a program called Children's Respite Homes of America, as you referenced in the beginning. And that's a much more, I think, easier brand and program for general audiences to kind of understand. And so we've created a website called childrensrespitehomes.org that shows a map of the United States. And so I think what we've been able to accomplish in the last 3 years about how we're trying to kind of get this system organized so that we can really make some change is that our national center now has become a focal point for all these communities that are trying to do these leaders, these pioneering people. I'm a marketing guy. My wife was a kindergarten teacher, and we started one of these healthcare community-based programs in Phoenix. We weren't, policy experts back in those days. We weren't business executive, and we had no idea how to do what we were doing. We kind of figured it out. But
Yeah.
now what our national center is able to do is provide that kind of expertise and coaching and mentoring to other leaders across the country. And so a lot of these leaders are bereaved parents themselves, parents whose children have died that want to kind of memorialize their son or daughter. They could be a nurse or a music therapist or somebody that really has worked with these families and understands the difficult journey that they're on, and said, we need to help support them in a much better way. We want to do this kind of program. And so when we get involved with those local communities, we're not really teaching them about the journey because they already get it. the things that they're asking us to help them support is, how the heck do you start an organization?
Yeah.
What are articles of incorporation and bylaws, and how do you form a board of directors, and how do you apply to the IRS to become a nonprofit? It's the business side of starting an organization and trying to make that organization successful that these champions are really looking for, and that's what we provide. And then
That's beautiful.
we have, but then it's also about change the world. And so for change the world, one of the things I did right off the bat when I formed this organization was I created a government affairs council and a national advisory council. And I wanted to bring senior leaders into forums that really were also passionate to change the world, to give them space and opportunities to connect regularly so that they had a mechanism to funnel their passions together and say, look, let's bring our skill sets, let's bring our energy. It's all volunteer. I mean, we're not, this is not like we've got this massive team, but our government affairs council has past Medicaid directors on this. We've got big deal attorney lobbyists on there and medical directors. We're writing policy papers that we're now getting ready to talk to senior leaders at CMS for. And it really is just a place for energy and passion in this area. So, obviously it's very specialized to medically fragile children, but the idea of this is just, that's how you change the world, man. It's
Yeah,
just,
absolutely. And one thing that I love that's really been potent in your story is community. One
yeah,
of my friends I was just recently talking to one of my friends about her starting her brand and business, and she didn't realize how impactful creating community around your idea, around the change that you're trying to see in the world, how important it is. I'm so grateful that you've been able to find that community that's been able to help not only Ryan House, but create the network that you have.
that was a very major conscious effort for me. When my son died, what happens when a child dies? I mean, Ryan, was 17 and a half years old. In the last 2 years of his life, we had a lot of support. So in this room, his bedroom that I'm in right now, we would have nighttime nurses come into this room through the home health system 5 nights a week. We were still very active with Ryan House. We were doing lots of medical appointments with him. So there was just a lot of activity around Ryan all the time. In our house, we had caregivers coming into our house, helping us throughout the day, throughout the night. So we were not very, we always had a lot of support around us, thankfully. And not a lot of families do, but we were very fortunate to be able to coordinate all that. When your child dies, all of that goes away immediately. And
Wow.
it's now quiet. And that quietness for me was just deafening. It just was, I was so used to for so many years just having that dynamic of people around and everything. And when all of a sudden you're now in your own house, sitting there by yourself, your son's not there, none of the caregivers are around. It's just like, this was driving me nuts. And
Yeah.
so about 6 months into this, that's really was a key thing that I was internalizing. And I said, I got to get back to my people. I got to get back to community. I need to get back to people that really have shared hearts and shared passions. This isn't
Mhm.
about money. Nobody gets into this kind of work to make lots of money. It really is, it's a feel good, do right for other people, and just be around people that matter and just do something that matters.
And I was going to ask too, how has this whole entire work that you've been doing, how's it been helping in your healing journey with,
It's for me personally as a dad, and I always like to introduce myself often as I'm a proud dad, is that, I think about Ryan all the time. And so I love, as I said, being in this space, in this room, why I choose to home office out of this room. And I love that I've got the Marvel posters. Some of those posters are autographed. My son had an awesome life. It just was way, way, way too short. And so I think that it's very much about how I personally grieve, is that I don't forget. And I always remember what I love about technology today. I saw some of your other podcasts on some of the cool things that you talk about with technology and things. And so one of the things that I was going to appreciate about this time of life that I got to experience Ryan's life in is that Ryan was a nerd and he loved it. So when Ryan was on the computer, he wanted to be an influencer. He wanted to do what you're doing right now and do podcasts
um,
and stuff. And so when he was on the computer, he was just like anybody else. He was in his wheelchair, but he could roll up to this computer. He could Bluetooth to the computer. He put on his headset with Dragon speaking software, and he was doing all of this stuff, which also means that he has YouTube videos still out there when he was he was recording gaming things with his friends and stuff. And so what I appreciate is that I can now go back and watch some of that stuff when I want to get a dose of Ryan and just hear his voice and hear his laugh and hear the goofiness that was Ryan. I still have access to all of that kind of stuff. And so for me, I just bring that into my life as much as I can. It's not about getting over it. It's not about letting time heal the wound. It's like, no, it sucks. It still is really tough. And I'm 7 years into it almost, but it's the way I do it is I embrace it.
You're such a great dad. I just want you to know that. And just hearing you talk about your son, it makes me feel super emotional. I didn't have both parents in my life. And when
Yeah.
I see, because I grew up around my friends and they all had, dads and they were always great. Like you are a good father. So yeah, that's so powerful what you're doing on behalf of Ryan. And I kind of wanted to just ask before I let you go and before we end today, like, how do you feel Ryan would feel with everything that you're doing and how you're honoring his image?
It's funny as like when we started Ryan House, part of the magic of Ryan House was Ryan, clearly. Ryan was a cute little towhead blonde kid driving a power wheelchair. The kid was so mature and so verbal, you couldn't shut the kid up, but he was very physically challenged. So when we would be at an event or the media, a lot of media attention and local channel news people would do remotes at a coffee place that was doing a small check donation to Ryan House or something. Ryan was being interviewed a lot. And in those early days, he was fine with all of that stuff. And then as he aged, he started to really not like to do any of that stuff. He's like, he felt like he was being used a little bit. And he's like, I don't want to do this. So then it was about, well, Ryan House has really taken over. So my wife and I had to like bribe him all the time. We're like, come on, Ryan, do the media, do the news interview, and you get a Lego set. And
Yeah.
so he's like, all right, fine, I'll do it for the Lego set. And then as he got older and he got into his teenage years, as his maturity really came into a place, he understood his role and he understood the, I think, how he was helping others also just by being him. I mean, one of the things that he hated when people would say, Ryan, you're such an inspiration. He's like, how am I an inspiration? I'm just living my life. I'm just doing this. But I think as he realized his particular role in our community was very inspirational for other families. And just what was created out of his journey was important. And I think he really became very proud of that too. So I think he'd love it. And he'd be helping me too. So, I mean, I have technical problems all the time on this computer. And it's like, Ryan, where are you, man? I can't get this to work, or I can't get that to work, or I got to update this, that, and the other thing, or let's do a quick little video edit of something. And I wish he was here so much.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. And I know he would be proud of everything that you're doing and how much you're looking to just change the world. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
But before I let you go, I really wanted to ask, what would you like listeners to take away from your story if they've never faced something similar in their own lives?
Well, I know that, what I've always appreciated, as a marketing person, I worked a lot with entrepreneurs. I always felt myself was an entrepreneur. So I always was really driven to want to do things. And now with the work that I do with the national nonprofit, it is very much purpose driven for me. And I think that's one of the main messages that I would love your audience to really know is that what I hope you hear from my story is not I would love for you to want to be supportive of what I'm doing, but what's more important is find your own voice, find your own passion. And that's really the driver for you to really make your own change in the world and your own difference and just start moving forward in that area. You don't have to have a clear path. You don't have to have a clear vision. Just start taking steps forward. Just start moving towards your passion and good things will happen. If you just start moving, I think that that's really kind of good. If my story and the work that we're doing really inspires you to want to learn more or connect with us, I really encourage you to come to our website, which is childrensrespitehomes.org. We are building a national organization, so we're always looking for awesome people that want to bring their skills. They maybe even want to be on our board to try and help us take our organization to the national level. We're 3 years into this now, but we still got a long way to go. Obviously, we need funding and support ourselves. So if that is something that inspires your audience and they want to help support us with a small donation, we would greatly appreciate that too. And that all can happen at childrensrespitehomes.org.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here, you telling your story, and giving us insight to Ryan and who he was as a person. And I'm kind of at a loss for words at just what you guys are doing because it's so remarkable. Like I said, loss is hard for anyone. I've experienced some of it in my life, and it, like I said, changed my family dynamic completely. And to find inspiration behind what you guys are doing, it's amazing. And it really has brought so much perspective to me today. So hopefully anyone that's listening, it's done the same for you guys. If you guys have been through any loss and, have found it hard to kind of cope with it. But before I let you go, I would love for you, I know you just left the website, but if there's any other social media tags where we can follow, or like you said, if anyone wants to donate or if they want to be a part of the cause, where they can go to.
Yeah, the best place is childrensrespitehomes.org. Obviously, we have a Facebook page that we try and keep the community updated on what we're doing. We have a LinkedIn page too, but mostly it's the website. Come on and get onto our contact list. You can join our email lists if this is an area that you care about and want to learn more about. We'd love to have you connected. And I just hope that you go out and change the world. If I were with you physically right now, I'd give you a big hug because people say, how did you do this? And I said, you know what we do? We hug. This is really just an emotional passion. It's about your passion, your emotion. I clearly have a North Star in my son that is driving my fuel. And it's all about, let's make this world better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing your story. And thank you for being here. Like you said, if you guys want to go, we'll leave the show notes below. So if you want to follow Jonathan and his mission and be a part of the cause, you are more than welcome to follow in the show notes. Thank you again, Jonathan. Until next time, guys, we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.
Hey guys, it's Icarus here.
And Amelia.
And I'm here to tell you if you'd like to join our brand new adventure. Go to DevonTaylorAuthor.com to learn more.
And check out the cool items like the new bucket hat.
Yeah, and so much more. See you guys there.